and I want to share my story with you of how I came to know Jesus out of atheism. A couple of reasons why I want to share this story is, first, because it's the most important thing, it's the most life-changing thing that's ever happened to me, and it's the most important thing in my whole life. And I want others to know. I want others to know what happened. And honestly, I wish that somebody would have told me sooner, you know? I wish that somebody would have sat me down and, you know, said, hey, you know, I care about you. This is, I want you to know what I believe, and I want you to know why I believe in this God and what Jesus has done for me in my life. Because I never really had examples of that. I never really had somebody, you know, sit me down and take the time and tell me to do that. So I want to do that for others. And you never know. I never thought ever that I would become a Christian, but here I am. And you never know when your life is just going to totally and absolutely completely change. And it may be from the least likely source you ever thought. And that was definitely the case for me. I also want to give hope and encouragement for fellow believers, and for those that don't claim Christianity, for those that don't know Jesus. I want you to know that there's something so wonderful out there, and something that is so much better than anything that this life and this world has to offer. And it is real. It is so real. So if you're here watching, please bear with me. I'm going to give some background info and then go into exactly what happened in my life. So please watch till the end. So I grew up, first of all, I grew up not believing, obviously. I grew up as an atheist. I grew up just believing that there was no God. And it just didn't make sense to me that there could be a God. And I think there are a few factors for that for me, because I wasn't really raised in a church-going home. I wasn't raised in a believing home. And I mean, I'd been taken to churches like a handful of times from like friends and stuff like that, like a Catholic church, Protestant churches, but it just never made any sense to me. I always got kind of creeped out going into a church, because it didn't make sense how somebody could possibly believe. I didn't see any evidence. Nobody ever told me, like I said, nobody ever told me why. So it just really, I just got such a creepy feeling, and especially when the name of Jesus was mentioned, it's just like what does this have to do with me? Like, what, all these people gathering together to try and be like good people, like it really just weirded me out. And I do remember one time at a church that I went to, and all the kids went to a separate room, and obviously I was a kid at the time, and I asked the leader of that group, I asked him something about like, how did he know that this was all true? Like, how, and honestly, I think a part of me as a kid wanted to know in that moment, you know, how could this person be so confident? And this person got like really mad at me instead, you know, like, how dare you question my beliefs? And but I was just honestly curious, and so it just didn't make any sense. And another thing, I think growing up, like being taught in school about like the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution, these things really have an effect, you know, on a child. And I think that, you know, if you can explain everything away without God, as, you know, as these explanations seem to try to do, then it for me, it just absolutely made no sense. And I got to a point growing up that I just knew, like I knew in my mind that God didn't exist. And I didn't, not that I really thought about it a lot. I really didn't think about it, and I didn't want to think about it. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I honestly, in the back of my mind, thought that people who believed in God were stupid. But the funny thing is that I wouldn't like tell people that I was an atheist either. I wouldn't be vocal about that, because I always got this feeling that I would be judged by people who believed. And I didn't know, I had no idea really like who believed or who didn't believe, you know, that wasn't really super clear to me. But yeah, I always got this feeling like I would just be judged. And so I kind of hid it. at the same time, I just kind of pushed the whole thing away too. Like I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to talk about it. If anybody mentioned like God or church or the Bible or Jesus, there would be like a light switch that would just turn off in my brain. Like my brain would just turn off, and I wasn't receiving anything. It would just go totally over my head. And so I came to a point where I really, really, thought that nobody could tell me any different, that there was no God, and I didn't want to hear about it, and that was just it. Another aspect of my childhood and kind of a chain of events that leads up to my conversion, really, is I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but I had a really unstable childhood. I moved around a lot. I think between kindergarten and 12th grade, I went to like 10 or 11 different schools. So I was used to being the new kid. I was used to just moving from place to place to place to place, not really able to put down roots anywhere. I also grew up with a lot of pain and a lot of sadness and loneliness, rejection, and I grew up with a lot of fear. Like I constantly in my home life, I felt like I was living life walking around on eggshells, and so I was constantly afraid and many times just sad and lonely. And as I got older, I think it just got worse and worse. So I would try to fill that emptiness and fill that loneliness and try to feel some sense of like worth and love and everything like that with other things in life. And especially once I got to like middle school and high school, I sought to like get all of my try to find all of my validation and try to find that love and fill that void and that emptiness with relationships. And that just became like I thought if I found the perfect relationship, I thought if I found the perfect girl, that I would, I guess, be like rescued, that that sense of rejection, that sense of sadness and loneliness and emptiness would go away. And I always imagined that this perfect girl would come along at some point, and that would kind of be, I wouldn't have to feel the way that I felt anymore. But what really happened instead, kind of throughout my young adult life and everything like that, is I just had heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And it was so strange because it was always like in almost exactly the same way, like clockwork, like it was the same timing, the same way. And it would be like the same exact situation, but just a different face. And I think it made the issue worse every time, because I always felt like what's going on here? And it hurt worse every time because it was like it was opening up every other past wound, and then it was also like opening up all of that I was feeling, growing up as a kid too. So, it just got worse and worse, and I sought harder and harder. And when I was in high school, I wanted to join the Marines, but I was in a relationship at that time, and I wasn't going to join the Marines because of the relationship. But halfway through my senior year, that was a really bad breakup. And after she broke up with me, I decided that I'm going to join the Marines. And also at that time, that was like the most painful breakup that I had had to that point. It was like nearly unbearable. I didn't talk to anybody for like 2 weeks, I remember. I honestly thought that like life was over for me. And, but once I got out of that and, I decided to do what I originally wanted to do in joining the Marines, I also decided that in order to avoid rejection again in the future, that I wanted to, like go to the gym a lot and like eat a lot of food, because I was really skinny. I was really skinny growing up, and it's hard for me to gain weight naturally. And so I thought like if I bulked up and, looked like the guys in the gym magazines, and in Hollywood and everything like that, that I could avoid being rejected again. And I kind of used that negative energy to fuel me, almost like I wanted revenge too, like look what you left, you could have had this, but um, and so that kind of became an obsession in my life, and everything was kind of geared around my body image and how I wanted to look. And so I was constantly always thinking about eating or thinking about working out. And so I started learning like how to work out every part of my body, and going to the gym, and also getting ready to join the Marines. And this absolute obsession carried on into the Marine Corps as well, and into the first few years in the Marines. And then there was a point where I kind of plateaued and I couldn't gain any more weight, and I started taking a weight gainer too. And I remember my friends in the Marines, like we'd be at the gym, and people used to call me Mac in the Marines, and they'd be like, Mac, like, dude, when are you gonna stop? Like, you're so huge already. And I would look in the mirror and I couldn't see it at all. Like I would look and I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not huge. But the thing is, growing up skinny, and then being in that environment in the military, and those gyms on bases, all the guys there, they're just trying to lift as much weight as they can, and they're trying to get their arms as big as they can, and there's always somebody that's bigger than you. So it's a never-ending thing. You just keep going and going and going, and you're never satisfied. It's never ending, and then you never arrive, because there's always somebody that has more than you, that can bench more than you, that can squat more than you. So it was just a total and absolute obsession. And all this while, nothing was really getting any better on the inside, but I didn't really want to think about that. I just was motivated by this obsession. And what was really strange is one day I saw what my friend saw. One day I saw it. Like, I remember being in my barracks room, and I walked past the mirror there, and before I saw myself in the mirror, for some reason I expected to see my old self from high school. I expected to see kind of a skinnier version of what I was. And for some reason I identified with that image of myself and thought that was me. So when I saw what I had become, it totally shocked me, and I thought, oh, who's this like Hulk looking person? And this it's just gone too far. And so I made a decision there that I wanted to change the way that I looked. I still was just totally and completely concerned with my body image, but I wanted to look somewhere halfway in between my scrawny self in high school and what I had become in the Marines. And part of what I did to accomplish that was change the way I ate. And I switched over to eating. At first I was eating only chicken and vegetables, totally. But the thing is that before I was eating so much, I was eating all the time. I carried food around in a bag with me all the time, and I was taking weight gainer in between meals and in between snacks, and I was consuming so many calories that even though I was totally getting full on chicken and vegetables, I was starving myself, and I didn't realize it. And part of what happens when you eat all the time, and it was just, I remember it was so uncomfortable. Like, my stomach felt so full all the time, and my taste buds were like, they were turned off, because my body was like always full, so my taste buds weren't like reacting to food. So it was like it was a chore to eat. And I was known for like never eating desserts or snack food or like really anything unhealthy anyway, and it was easy to do that when I was always full. But after I started eating only chicken and vegetables, I remember one day I had a cookie, and I was with like some family and stuff, and that was like really different. I was like, whoa, I haven't wanted something like this in a really long time. And then I wanted another one, and I remember one of my family members kind of like looking over, like what's going on here? And I remember like feeling really ashamed in that moment, because I had prided myself in being the person that doesn't eat dessert, and didn't eat unhealthy. And so I remember feeling like a lot of shame, but like the cravings were still so strong. So I remember I just wanted to eat more and more junk food. But I remember after that I was like, okay, like I'm never doing that again. I'm just going to go back to eating strict, and I could only do it for a while, because I didn't realize I was starving myself. And even though I started learning more about nutrition after that, I was working on getting my personal training certification, so I was learning about nutrition. I remember I was on like a meal plan at the time, but even then I still didn't realize like how many calories like I really need just to kind of maintain a normal weight. So I was still starving myself, and I just started eating more junk food after long periods of not eating any. And I didn't know what to do. I tried so hard to stop doing that. And I remember one time it was like this voice in the back of my head that was telling me, uh, you could just throw it up, like tons of people do that, that could take care of your problem there. And so I did. It took me a while to really learn how to do it, but um, what's what's kind of sad is that I used to make fun of people that had eating disorders, and then I got an eating disorder myself. I became bulimic, and it really, really quickly got out of hand. Um, and it was scary for me because it was the first time that I really felt that I didn't have control, that this thing like had me in bondage and in slavery, and I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't have enough willpower. Every single time I'd be like, okay, never again, and then I just do it again within a matter of a week or two, and it was really scary because I've never had that loss of control before. That something totally overpowered me, and it was also the first time in my life that I realized that there's something that I really need help with, and I wasn't used to that. I thought I could handle everything myself. I remember I started going to Overeaters Anonymous meetings, but nothing really helped, and it was awful. It was really awful. Like it totally consumed me, and all I thought about all the time was food. That's all I could think about, and like I couldn't even enjoy spending time with my family. Like going out to a restaurant or like family get-togethers, because it was always in the back of my mind, like, okay, like is there a bathroom here, that I can go to after I eat? Because most of the time I was trying to eat so strict, but it's hard to do that, at restaurants and with other people, and when there's so much that you tell yourself that you can't eat, it's hard to socialize. So I was just totally, it really, really scared me. And so you can see that all of these things are kind of intertwined, and they're all kind of connected and linked together, like all the terrible feelings that I had growing up, and the pain and the loneliness and the fear, and trying to fill that with relationships and thinking, well, in order to have a relationship work and to not be rejected, I have to look a certain way. And so because of that, I have to obsess with eating and working out. And then in order to counteract what I had been doing, I have to change what I'm eating. And then I got an eating disorder because of it. So it's like this sort of downward spiral chain of events in my life. And so this kind of all leads up to the events like immediately preceding my conversion. So I was in the last year of my 4-year contract in the Marines, and I met a girl that was really close to where I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, and we really hit it off, and I really liked this girl a lot. I remember, things got really obsessive really quickly, which is kind of how, it was kind of the pattern of my relationships growing up. And I remember we would stay up on the phone till like 5 a.m, like every night. And it was weird. It was almost like there were these signs, and I didn't believe in anything supernatural at all. But I remember we had all these weird things in common, and like we both had an older half brother that was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5 years older than us, and we'd never met him. And we both had invented like the combination of hot Cheetos and cream cheese at our high school, and then got everybody else doing it too. And so it was just really, really strange. And there was more I don't really remember, but I remember like I really, really liked her a lot. And then at one point I remember her telling me like, "Hey, I'm a Christian." And I was like, "Look, I'll be upfront with you. Like, I don't really believe in anything like that. And like, I don't go to church, and I don't really plan to. And, I don't believe in anything supernatural at all. I only believe in what our senses can tell us, and in science and everything, like we're a sophisticated culture here and we know everything." But I remember she told me, "Oh, I'm not a Bible thumper, so don't worry about it." And I was like, "Okay." So I kind of just blew that off and didn't really think about it much after that. But once things got more serious between us, I think she started to feel the conviction of being in a relationship with somebody that didn't believe what she believed. And I think with some good advice from friends, she ended up breaking things off with me. And I remember I was devastated. It was, again, the same pattern, the same thing, the same timing, a different face. And I was just like, it felt totally hopeless. And I remember that conversation that we had on the phone. And at one point she was like, "For what it's worth, I think you should read this book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel." And I said, "Oh, okay." But in my mind I was saying, "Yeah, no way. There's no way I'm going to read this book, because I already knew that God didn't exist, like what's that going to do, Like I don't want anything to do with that." But again, this other part of my mind was saying, like, how could a person actually believe God so much that they're going to let it affect their life? Like, how is she going to break up with me and make this decision that she maybe doesn't even want to make because she believes in God? How is she going to let God dictate her life, and prevent her from having, things that she wants or whatever, or go after things that she wants? And that really frustrated me. I remember feeling so frustrated. Like, why does this have to end just because she believes in God? That's so silly. And I remember, not for any good reason, not for noble reasons or whatever, like part of me was just so frustrated that I wanted to like go on this religious journey, and, I imagine myself talking to people of all types of faith and asking them, like, "Why do you believe?" But more like out of self-pity and selfishness than anything else, kind of like, look at this poor guy, look at this poor hopeless romantic who, here's the one that he can't have, and he's doomed to forever try to make sense of it when it's never going to make sense, and nothing is ever going to change. And I thought that I was, going to be doing this thing for years and years until I finally felt like not doing it anymore. But instead I ended up at a Barnes & Noble. I mentioned that I was studying to be a personal trainer. And so I had the take-home material, and I would go out to this little cafe at a Barnes & Noble in Oceanside, and I would just read just to be around other people. And so I remember going to Barnes & Noble one time, and I was reading so much. I was really trying to go through this personal training course really, really quickly. And my work schedule was like really rough too. So I was just, at one point I was just done. I was just totally brain cramped. And I was like, okay, I need a break from this. And I closed the book, and I remember I had this thought like, oh, that book that she mentioned might be here, and I could go and find it and start to read it, and it's not going to cost me anything. And so I did. I went and I found the book, and I came back and I opened the book and I started reading. And the way that Lee Strobel starts off the book, the way he opens up the book in his introduction, I think is really clever. Because he was an investigative journalist with the Chicago Tribune for 30 some odd years, and also like a legal affairs editor. And he eventually tried to disprove Christianity because his wife became a Christian, and he was really upset about that. So he tried to use his expertise to disprove Christianity. And after about 2 years of really searching the evidence and what's out there, he came to the conclusion that it takes more faith, more blind faith, to continue to be an atheist than it does to believe in Jesus. And so in his introduction, he talks about a court case that he was involved with the Chicago Tribune. And this is what they call an open and shut case, where you open the case and the evidence is so strong in one direction that you don't need to take another look at it again, and you just close the case. So there was this open and shut case. A guy shot a cop, and he confessed to it, open and shut. So he gets a call from a guy who I guess is an informant, and this guy says, "Hey, open up this case again." And he says, "Why would I do that? It's an open and shut case." He says, "Well, I got this information here. I got this little extra piece of evidence, and with that piece of evidence, that case was just totally blown totally open, and the whole case was flipped upside down. And when all of the evidence, the complete total amount of evidence, was taken into account, and it was searched thoroughly, what started out looking one way ended up being completely opposite. And so he uses that experience in his life to ask, what has been your search for what you believe about life and about God or about no God? Has that been an open and shut case for you? Or have you really taken time to search the evidence in what's out there? And, if I was honest at the time, I'd say, well, I haven't really done a search because I already know that God doesn't exist. So why would I need to search for any evidence if I already know? And what's interesting about the book is that every chapter of his book after the intro is a classification of evidence that they use in the court of law. And so that's why he calls it the case for Christ, because it's exactly like a court case. The evidence that he presents is the same type of evidence in the court of law. And so he puts the reader in the juror's seat, and he says, okay, you're in the jury now. So as a juror in the court of law, you have to swear that you have no biases, that you have no preconceived notions, that you have no prejudices in this case. And you just have to take the evidence as it comes, and based solely on the evidence, you have to come to a conclusion. And I definitely also had some biases and some preconceived notions and some prejudices. But I had this thought, and I think this was really important at the time. I had this thought, there have been things in my life that I thought I was right about, but I ended up being wrong about. And the really important thing that I thought after that was, what would be the worst thing that I could ever be wrong about? And even as an atheist, I couldn't think of anything worse than being wrong about God. Because if I was wrong about God, then that would have eternal consequences. And nothing else that I could think of would have eternal consequences, because I don't even believe in eternity, at the time. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'll read this book, and I'll even read it with an open mind, And, what's it going to cost me, $15-20? But if you would have gone back and asked me, even in that moment, is there any way that reading this book is going to change anything about what you believe? And I would have said no, no way. There's absolutely no way. Even though you may think that I would have motivation to want to believe, because of the girl that broke up with me. I already knew, like, when we had that conversation on the phone, I knew, okay, I'm never going to see this girl again. Because I'm not going to believe a lie. I'm not going to change my life for somebody else and pretend that I believe something that I don't believe, and so, I knew that I was never going to see her again, but for some reason, I also knew that the book wasn't going to change anything, and I still, for some reason, read it. So anyway, I bought the book that night, and I started reading more, and all of a sudden, all this evidence started piling up. And none of it was anything I ever expected. I started seeing evidence that I didn't even think was possible. And I mean scholarly evidence, And I started thinking, like, it was really strange, because it felt like the pause button was pressed on my life, pretty early on, and my life was paused, and I had to I had to know everything that was in this book. I had to know everything that Lee Strobel researched and what he found out before I could move on with my life, because it was too strange. And I didn't even like reading at the time. I mean, I never liked reading before, other than like textbooks. I probably read 2 books all the way through my entire life before that. But I read this book in less than 48 hours. And just sitting alone in my room, maybe about 3/4 of the way through the book, I knew, because the evidence was just, it was embarrassing. There was so much evidence. It was an overwhelming amount of evidence. And so logically, about that time, I came to the conclusion that I've been deceived. This is all true. This is all real. But it wasn't just a logic thing. It wasn't just an intellect thing, because I also had this experience with this God that I never thought could be real. This God that I never considered, this God that I mocked, this God that I totally, I just never thought it was possible. And I wasn't even actually seeking him, and yet he was revealing himself to me. And I had the experience. It was like all of a sudden I knew him, like more than I know anything or anyone, more than I know my own mother. Like I knew God. And I don't know how else to explain it. Like I understood what it meant when people said that they were born again, because I felt like I had become a totally different person, completely. And I remember just like, it was like my whole world turned right side up. And because I was living in an upside down world before, it was like everything made sense all of a sudden. It was like, colors were brighter, and I just had this deep sense of awe. And I remember it was like there was this hidden file in the back of my mind that said open in case God is real. And it was like I all of a sudden knew all of these things. Like all of a sudden I just knew that he was real. I knew that God was real. I knew that he's always been there. And I knew that he could read my mind, and that he knew my heart, and he knew my intentions. And I somehow knew that sin was real. And I remember like equating it with fire at the time, like, oh, I don't want to touch that fire. I don't want anything to do with that. And just everything was different, and I had been so accustomed to, I guess, just, darkness before, and not really thinking and not really realizing that there's some accountability out there, and somebody actually knows my thoughts and my heart and my motives and my intentions. Like I thought all of those things were secret. I thought all of those things were just my my dark little secret that I got to hold on to and nobody else got to see. And because of that, I was so selfish. I only cared about myself. And when I thought there was no God, I had no reason to be a good person or to care about any other person but myself. But like he gave me this new heart, and I all of a sudden I cared about people, and I loved people. And I remember going to work the next day, and I found the 2 people that I knew like were Christians at my work, and I was like asking them about the Bible, and then I told them what happened, and their jaw just hit the floor, and they looked at me and they're like, honestly, Mac, like out of everybody here, you were the last person we ever would have thought would have come to Jesus, And, that's the type of person I was, But Paul says he was the chiefest of sinners, and, maybe it's because he didn't know me. But it just everything changed. I all of a sudden knew that, like, I wanted to read the Bible, and, like, I all of a sudden knew, like, I wanted to be baptized and then, like, go to church and everything like that. And I remember asking my friends, I was like, should I read only the New Testament or Old and New Testament? They're like, no, read both. And my friend's wife gave me her Bible, and I remember going back to my room, the same place that I was reading The Case for Christ, the same place that I got saved, and I remember opening up to Genesis 1:1 and just reading, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and just being like, oh, because it was so alive, like no other words, like no other book has ever become alive to me. And the Spirit just made it so real, you know, and God's word is powerful and living and active. And I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. And to kind of circle back to my eating disorder, I didn't have like an immediate like deliverance from that, because I didn't even pray about it for a couple of weeks. You know, I was an atheist for so long that you know, I wasn't used to having a God that I could pray to and that, you know, loved me and cared about me. I mean, he always loved me and cared about me, but I never acknowledged him. So I remember I was going through a pretty bad episode one time of binging and purging, and I was in the shower, and then the thought came to my mind like, oh, why don't you just pray to Jesus? And I was like, okay, let's do that. And so I just prayed, you know, that he would help me, because I obviously couldn't do anything about it myself. And I didn't have like a lightning bolt experience at that moment, but it was just over the next few weeks, just reading his word and realizing that this life is so temporary, that this life is just a mist, it's a vapor, it's here, and then it's gone. And knowing that this body of mine that I have now, this life isn't the only time that I have it. It's going to be, in the next life, it's going to be perfected, and it's going to be glorified, and it's going to be resurrected. And so just being renewed in my mind through his word and through his truth, he completely set me free. And I never had the urge ever again to throw up food. And I'm telling you, this for a good year and a half, this had such a grip on me, and there was no amount of willpower, there's no amount of positive thinking, there's no amount of anything else that would even come close to changing me from the inside of how I thought and felt about my body and about food and everything like that. And there's no other way. I was totally in slavery to this, and Jesus set me free. And to this day, you know, to give you a little bit of a timeline for this, the day that I got saved was April 6th, 2010. So, I mean, this has been over 10 years. And I couldn't hardly go a week before, you know, for a solid year and a half. So yeah, I encourage you guys, you know, if you don't know Jesus, you know, maybe you were like me, and, you know, you think there's no way. Like, you know, great story and all, but there's just no way. And maybe you would ask yourself the same question that I asked myself, you know, and think to yourself the same thing that I thought to myself. Like, you know, maybe there's things in my life that I thought I was right about, but I ended up being wrong about. And what would be the worst thing that you could ever be wrong about? Isn't the same answer that I had? Wouldn't being wrong about God be the worst thing you could ever be wrong about? And is it worth being wrong about that? You know, is it not worth taking some time to really search into this? Because wouldn't you want it to be true? I mean, if it were true, wouldn't you want it? I mean, if Jesus really, if God really came down into the person of Jesus and lived and taught and did miracles and lived a sinless life and died on the cross to forgive you all your sin and was resurrected from the dead to give us the assurance of being resurrected and have eternal life, like, wouldn't you want that to be true? I remember, to the best of my knowledge, I think if you would have gone back and asked me that when I was an atheist, I would say, well, yeah, I mean, if you could offer me eternal life and, put me in a place that has no pain and no death and no sickness and no sorrow and no rejection and no hurt and no pain, and of course, like, who wouldn't want that? But that's just not how the world is, but I'm telling you guys, this is real. This is so, so real. And I'm telling you, I know how hard-hearted and how hard-headed I was as an atheist. And I know without a doubt, there is no one, there is nothing that could have ever changed my mind about this except a God that actually exists. There's nothing else. Nothing. The biggest miracle in this whole story is that this guy, who the last thing that I ever would have thought that I would have become is a Jesus freak, all of a sudden I want to tell everybody about Jesus because he saved me. Because he saved me, he set me free, and I owe everything to him. And I count everything else as being rubbish and garbage and loss. Everything else is trash compared to knowing him. And there is no other way that a hard-hearted atheist can all of a sudden, I mean, it was like that. There's no other way other than a God that actually exists. And, the book that I read, there's so much great evidence out there. I really do recommend reading it, if you're interested at all. But, I don't think you need to read it because there's a living God out there. And, even if you're thinking, God, there's no way. There is absolutely no way. I don't believe what this guy is saying at all. Like, I challenge you to just get alone and just go before him. And even if you don't believe anybody hears you, just ask, Jesus, is this real? Is what this guy's saying, is this true at all? Because if it is, I'd want to know. I'd want to know if I need you and I need your forgiveness and you can offer me eternal life. Like, I'd want to know, because honestly, who wouldn't? And I believe full-heartedly that he will make it known to you, that he will reveal it to you one way or another. And what's beautiful is not everybody comes to Jesus the same exact way. It's not, like, it's not like, not everyone has to do it the same way that I did. Not everyone has to read, the case for Christ, but, I just want to encourage you guys, like, God loves you so, so much. He is in love with you, and he loves you so much, and he wants to be in a relationship with you so much that he gave everything that he had. It cost him everything. See, because the Bible says that the life is in the blood. So when God came down as a person, as a human being, and shed his blood for you, he was giving up. He was shedding the very life of God. The most valuable, the most precious thing, most infinitely valuable thing, God's very life was poured out to buy you, to save you, and to redeem you. That's how much he loves you. He couldn't have paid a higher price for you. And so so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Guys, I'm convinced that this God doesn't want to be known by intellect. He doesn't want to be made known in your life because you're so smart. He doesn't want to be made known, because you're so rich or so famous or whatever. He wants everybody to know him. And that's what's so beautiful about this message. Anybody can understand it, that God came down as a person, that he lived a perfect life, that he taught, did miracles, that he died for our sin, and that he was resurrected from the dead. Everybody can understand that. You don't have to be super intelligent to understand it. And you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be all these things. In fact, I think these things can be hindrances in knowing him, because there's a God out there that wants everybody to know him. So if through your intelligence it doesn't make sense to you, it that might be the thing that's holding you back. Because it says in the Bible that God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So, a lot of people say, that's good for you, that you found your way, that you found your truth. But this isn't my truth. This is the truth. This is the only truth. We are all going to stand before him, and Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And nobody comes to the Father but through me. And a lot of people say, well, that's great that you came to a point of desperation in your life, and you had to reach out for the crutch of religion. But that's not the case at all. That's not what happened by any stretch of the imagination. Because God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble, the fact that people get into desperate places in their life and maybe are brought to a place of humility, that people are finding God and being completely transformed in those states, that more proves that God's word is true, and that this is the type of God that is really out there. And so I encourage you guys, just, humble your hearts, even if you think there's absolutely no way, because he is the way. And yeah, a lot of people also ask me about, I finished the story and people are like, well, what about the girl? Like, you became a Christian again, so what happened? So I'll tell you what happened. What happened is absolutely nothing. Nothing happened. I think we met one more time, and there was like a healthy skepticism there, because you break up with this guy because he's not a Christian, then all of a sudden he turns around and says, I believe, a couple days later. It's got to be a little, I'd be reasonably skeptical about that. And I think eventually took a while for her to, come to, truly believe that, wow, this is like the real thing, but like, we never got together, we never dated again. And I'm glad that it happened that way. And if you're out there watching, thank you. But I'm glad that it happened that way, because I don't want anybody to be able to say, well, you just converted to be with her. You just converted for a relationship, because it's been over 10 years. And Jesus is still the best thing that's ever happened to me. I found something so much better than what I thought I wanted. I found the best thing. They say that the gospel, it means good news. This isn't just good news. This is the best news. This is the best thing that you could ever hear. And I think for many of you watching that, this is the best thing that you've ever heard. And this may just be the most important thing that you've ever heard in your entire life up to this point. And I believe that the Holy Spirit is reaching out to you and tugging your heart in a way that that no one or no thing or no person ever has before. And I can't do that. I can't take any credit for that, because I'm just a imperfect person that relies on Jesus, but he can. And so I encourage you guys, give your life to him. Make him the Lord of your life, and you'll never regret it. Things aren't always going to be easy. Things definitely won't always be perfect, and at times you people may try to harm you because of what you believe. People may try to persecute you or ridicule you or make fun of you because of your faith in Jesus. But that's the time that we rejoice, because we know that our reward in heaven is great. So